3 days after we laid Beverly to rest, the silence in our house was a physical weight. 45 years of marriage, and now just an echo where her laughter used to be. I sat in my recliner, staring at her empty one, the world feeling fundamentally wrong. The funeral itself was a blur of well-meaning but hollow condolences and the awful finality of watching her casket descend into the frozen February earth. But something else gnawed at me, a discordant note in the symphony of grief. My daughter, Angela, and her husband, Chad. They'd arrived late, slipping into the back row just as the pastor began. During my eulogy, I caught Angela's eye, but she looked away, dabbing at dry eyes. Chad stood beside her, jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the casket, with an intensity I couldn't decipher. They left the reception within an hour, Angela claiming I needed rest, though what I truly needed was my family around me, to not feel so utterly hollow. Now, 3 days later, not a word from them. No calls, no texts, just silence. Then the phone rang, a jarring sound in the quiet house. I almost let it go to voicemail, weary of more platitudes. But old habits die hard. "Mr. Sterling," a familiar yet formal voice said. "Edward Collins, our landlord at the Collins building, where Beverly and I had run Sterling Antiques for a decade. I'm sorry to bother you, but I found something. Something urgent that Beverly left with me before she passed." My pulse quickened. "What kind of something?" I asked. "I can't say over the phone," Edward whispered, his voice laced with an undeniable urgency. "You need to come to my office. The Collins building, above the antique shop. Can you come now?" I hesitated. "Edward, I don't think I'm up for—" "Mr. Sterling, please." There was something in his tone, a raw fear that cut through my grief. "And sir, don't tell Angela or Chad that you're coming." I sat bolt upright. "Why the hell not?" "Because Beverly made me promise," he said, taking a shaky breath. "She said, your life might depend on it." The line went dead. 72 years old, and the adrenaline surged through me like it used to in Vietnam. My heart hammered against my ribs. This could be a trap, a con to exploit a grieving widower. My knees creaked when I stood, my body not the soldier's it once was. But Edward had said Beverly's name, mentioned something she'd left, and those words, "your life might depend on it," weren't to be taken lightly. If there was even a chance this was real, I had to go. I grabbed my coat. The cold February air bit at my lungs. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys. If this was a trap, so be it. I'd faced worse. But if Beverly had left a message, an explanation, a goodbye I hadn't received, I owed it to her memory to find out. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't know that everything I thought I knew about my wife's death was about to shatter. The grieving widower I'd been 3 days ago was about to go to war one last time. 20 minutes later, I stood at the foot of the narrow staircase leading to Edward's office. The steps seemed steeper, or perhaps I was just older. My hand found the wooden railing, my instincts screaming that something was profoundly wrong, or perhaps, impossibly, finally right. Each step was a protest from my aging knees. The stairwell smelled of furniture polish and old books, a scent that hit me like a physical blow. Beverly's scent. 30 years she'd spent in this building, and her essence still clung to its walls, just as her memory clung to my mind. The second-floor hallway was dim, shadows dancing from a single bulb. Edward's office door was ajar, no light from within. For a split second, I considered turning back, but I'd been a soldier. We didn't retreat. I pushed the door open. Edward stood by the window, silhouetted against the gray light. He turned, and I saw something new in his eyes. Not fear, but a weary resolve. He didn't offer condolences. Instead, he pointed to a small, worn leather journal on his desk. "Beverly gave this to me," he said, his voice low. "2 weeks ago, she made me promise not to open it unless something happened to her." He pushed it towards me. "She also said to tell you, the truth is in the details, Douglas. Look closely." I picked up the journal. It was Beverly's, her familiar handwriting on the cover, Sterling Antiques inventory log. But it felt heavier than it should. I opened it. The first few pages were indeed inventory, but then the entries changed. Dates, times, and cryptic notes. My heart sank as I recognized the names. Nicholas, my son. And then, Chad, Angela. Edward watched me, his face grim. She started coming to me a few months ago, Mr. Sterling. Said she was worried. Said things weren't right with Nicholas. Then, after his accident, she became frantic. Started leaving things with me. This journal, a sealed envelope. Said if anything happened to her, I was to give them to you, and only you. Nicholas, my son. He died 6 months ago. A supposed suicide, after being accused of embezzling from his company. The shame had been unbearable. Beverly had been devastated. I'd believed it, accepted it. But now, I flipped through the journal. Beverly had been investigating Nicholas's death. She suspected foul play. And the prime suspect, according to her meticulous notes, was Chad, my son-in-law, the man who had married my daughter, the man who had been at Nicholas's funeral, looking so stoic, so unreadable. Edward then handed me a small, sealed envelope. Inside, a flash drive. Beverly said this contains everything, he explained. Evidence, recordings. She said to tell you, he thinks he's so clever, but he underestimates a mother's love. The world tilted. My wife hadn't died of natural causes. She had been murdered, and my son-in-law was involved. The grief I'd felt was now replaced by a cold, burning rage. Edward told me Beverly had been in contact with a private investigator, a former detective named Anderson, and had been working with him for months, gathering evidence. She'd even staged her own death with Edward's help, to expose Chad. The funeral, the casket, the burial. It had all been a macabre performance to draw Chad out, to make him believe he'd succeeded. I left Edward's office a different man. The grieving widower was gone, replaced by a soldier with a mission. I had to expose Chad, clear Nicholas's name, and protect Angela. But Beverly's warning echoed in my mind. Don't tell Angela or Chad. They were in on it. Or at least Angela was being manipulated. I had to play along, to appear to be the broken old man they expected. The next few days were a blur of calculated moves. I returned home, pretending to be lost in grief. Chad and Angela were there, their presence now a sinister shadow. They offered me food, always insisting I eat. I remembered Beverly's journal, her notes about Chad's meticulous planning, his use of subtle poisons. I feigned a poor appetite, claiming grief had stolen my hunger. One morning, Chad brought me a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. "You need to eat, Dad," he said, his voice falsely solicitous. "Angela made them. She's worried about you." I watched him carefully. His eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of impatience. I ate a tiny portion, then excused myself to the bathroom. I crumbled a piece of the egg into the soil of a basil plant outside my window, a plant Beverly had nurtured. I hid the toast under my mattress. If I was right, the plant would show signs. The day passed in tense silence. I claimed my stomach was upset, refused lunch and dinner. Chad's frustration grew, his jaw clenching, his hands flexing into fists. He couldn't force-feed me without raising suspicion. As darkness fell, I used the flashlight on my old Nokia phone to check the plant. Its leaves were brown, wilted, dying, lethal. They'd tried to stage another natural death. Old man's heart gives out from grief. Chad gets the money, walks away clean. Just like they'd tried with Beverly. Just like they'd succeeded with Nicholas. I texted Edward the photos. Attempted poisoning via meal. Evidence photographed. Plant dead within 12 hours. His response was immediate. Beverly says tomorrow is the day. Final push. Stay alive until morning. Then another message from Beverly herself. I love you. Please be careful. After tomorrow, this ends. I typed back. I love you too. Tell Detective Anderson to be ready. And bring backup. I lay in bed, eyes closed, hand gripping the radiator pipe. I could hear Chad and Angela arguing downstairs, his voice growing louder, more frantic. Fragments reached me. DeLuca's deadline. One way or another. The power of attorney hadn't been signed. The poisoned meal had failed. Chad was out of options. Out of time. That made him more dangerous than ever. I positioned myself against the wall. Ready. If he came for me tonight, I'd be ready. The door opened at dawn. I hadn't slept, the radiator pipe still in my hand. But instead of violence, Chad entered, his eyes red-rimmed, his cheeks tear-stained. He looked broken, defeated. That's when he was most dangerous. "I'm dead," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I need to tell you the truth." I sat up slowly, keeping the pipe hidden. "What truth?" He sank onto the edge of my bed, head in his hands, the picture of a man at the end of his rope. "I've done terrible things. I'm so sorry." The performance was almost convincing. I remained silent, waiting. "I embezzled money from Sterling Manufacturing, $287,000 over 2 years. He looked up, desperate. "I have a gambling problem. Got in over my head with a loan shark. I know it's wrong." "Oh, Nicholas found out," I said carefully. "Yes," Chad whispered. "We argued about it. He was so angry, Dad. Said he'd turn me in, destroy my life, take Angela away from me. And then that night," he wiped his eyes, and I had to admit the tears looked real. Fear could do that. And he took pills, made it look like he'd been the one stealing, like the shame was too much. I tried to stop him. I begged him not to, but he'd already swallowed them. By the time I realized what he'd done, it was too late. I should have called for help. I know that now. Instead, I panicked. I let everyone believe he was the embezzler because I was too cowardly to admit my own mistakes. Every word was a carefully constructed lie, blaming Nicholas for his own murder, making my son the villain. Rage simmered within me, but I kept my face neutral. "You're saying Nicholas took his own life?" "Yes," Chad insisted, grabbing my hand. I forced myself not to pull away. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because if you don't help me, Anthony DeLuca's people will kill me today." The mask cracked. Real terror flooded his face, not remorse, but fear for his own life. "I owe him $300,000. He gave me until noon. If I don't have the money, I'm dead. And you? You want me to sign over Beverly's trust? Just temporarily. I'll pay you back every cent. I promise, Dad. I'll go to therapy. I'll fix myself. I'll make everything right." He was crying now. Real tears of genuine terror, not for what he'd done, but for what would happen to him. "Please, think of Angela. She'll be alone if they take me." I pretended to consider this, letting the silence stretch. "I need time to think about this." "We don't have time." His voice spiked. Then he caught himself. "Please, Dad. Just until I can get back on my feet." I nodded slowly. "All right, Chad, I'll help you. But first, I need to understand everything. Tell me the whole story, every detail, from the beginning." I had to keep him talking, to buy time for Anderson. Chad, desperate, began to recount his fabricated tale, weaving a web of lies about Nicholas's supposed gambling addiction and his own heroic attempts to save him. He spoke of DeLuca, a ruthless loan shark, and the pressure he was under. He even shed more tears, a master manipulator playing the victim. As he spoke, I subtly activated the recording device Edward had given me, hidden in my watch. Every word, every lie, was being captured. I watched the clock, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. Noon was approaching. Suddenly, the front door burst open downstairs. Heavy footsteps. Chad froze, his eyes wide with terror. "DeLuca!" he gasped, scrambling off the bed. "They're early." But it wasn't DeLuca. Detective Anderson, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. Chad's face drained of color. "Chad Pierce," Anderson said, his voice calm and authoritative. "You're under arrest for the murder of Nicholas Sterling and the attempted murder of Douglas Sterling, and for the attempted murder of Beverly Sterling." Chad stared, mouth agape, utterly stunned. "Beverly," he stammered. Just then, a figure stepped out from behind Anderson. Beverly, alive. Her eyes, usually so warm, now held a steely resolve. "Hello, Chad," she said, her voice clear and strong. Chad collapsed onto the floor, utterly broken. Angela, who had appeared behind the officers, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked from her mother to her husband, her face a mask of confusion and betrayal. The officers handcuffed Chad. As they led him away, he kept repeating, "Beverly, how?" But his words were lost. Angela rushed to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, is it really you?" Beverly embraced her, holding her tight. "It's me, sweetheart. I'm here." Later, at the police station, the full truth came out. Beverly, suspicious of Chad's sudden wealth and Nicholas's suicide, had begun her own investigation. She'd found evidence that Nicholas had discovered Chad's embezzlement and was about to expose him. Chad had murdered Nicholas, staging it as a suicide. When Beverly got too close, he tried to poison her, but she, with Edward's help, faked her death to protect herself and gather undeniable evidence. Angela, unknowingly, had been a pawn in Chad's game, her loyalty exploited. The recording I'd made, combined with Beverly's meticulous evidence, sealed Chad's fate. In the aftermath, Angela was devastated, but slowly, she began to heal. She cooperated fully with the police, her testimony crucial in Chad's conviction. The shock of her husband's betrayal and her mother's staged death was profound, but it also opened her eyes. She eventually divorced Chad and began rebuilding her life, dedicating herself to the Nicholas Sterling Foundation, which we established in my son's honor. Months later, Beverly and I sat on our porch, watching the sunset. The house no longer felt empty. It felt like home again. The shadows of grief and betrayal had receded, replaced by the quiet strength of survival and justice. Chad Pierce was in prison, facing a lifetime behind bars. DeLuca's network was dismantled, thanks to information Chad had inadvertently revealed. "You know what I'm thinking about?" Beverly asked, her hand finding mine. "What's that?" "That phone call from Edward, 2 years ago. If you hadn't answered, if you hadn't trusted him." "But I did," I said simply. "I answered. I investigated. I survived. We survived," Beverly corrected. "Together." I thought of Nicholas, of the son who died protecting truth, of Angela, who'd found her way back from darkness, of the families we'd helped, of Beverly who'd risked everything for justice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, we were Douglas and Beverly Sterling, alive, together, at peace. Beverly's profile remained beautiful, fierce. She caught me looking and smiled. "What are you thinking, old soldier?" "Just that we did it," I said. "We survived the worst thing that can happen to a family, and we came out the other side. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but together. And that's enough." I squeezed her hand. "That's everything." The sun dipped below the horizon. Somewhere Chad Pierce sat in a prison cell. Somewhere Angela was planning her future. And somewhere Nicholas was at peace. His name cleared, his courage recognized, his legacy alive in every family we helped. Tomorrow the work would continue. But tonight we were home. And that was enough. If you've stayed with me until now, you've heard more than just another family story. You've witnessed what happens when evil wears a familiar face and justice demands everything you have left. My name is Douglas Sterling. I'm 74 years old now, and God has walked beside me through valleys I never imagined I'd survive. When I was locked in that bedroom starving and desperate, I prayed. When Beverly revealed herself alive, I thanked God. And when Angela finally broke free from Chad's control, I knew God's mercy was real, even when his timing tests our faith. Looking back at this family story, I see my failures clearly. I was blind to Chad's manipulation. I dismissed the warning signs. I let my desire for family harmony override my instincts. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags because confrontation feels uncomfortable. Don't assume that someone who married into your family automatically deserves unconditional trust. Don't wait for tragedy to force your eyes open. People call what I did dad revenge. And maybe they're right. But here's the truth. My dad revenge wasn't born from hatred. It was born from love. Love for Nicholas, whose name had been destroyed. Love for Beverly, who risked everything. Even love for Angela, who needed saving from herself. True dad revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about making sure the truth survives, even when the victim doesn't. God gave me the strength to endure those 3 days of captivity. He gave Beverly the courage to stage her own death. He gave Angela the final push she needed to wear that wire and choose justice over fear. I won't pretend I understand why Nicholas had to die for this story to unfold, but I trust that his sacrifice meant something eternal. Here's what I want you to take from this family story. Protect the vulnerable in your life, but do it with open eyes. Financial elder abuse destroys thousands of families every year. Domestic violence thrives in silence. Manipulation hides behind charm and family ties. If your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. Investigate. Ask hard questions. Seek help before it's too late. The Nicholas Sterling Foundation exists because I refuse to let my son's death be meaningless. We've helped over 100 families, recovered millions in stolen assets, and put predators behind bars. But every victory reminds me we can't bring back the dead. We can only honor them by protecting the living. Your voice matters. If this story resonated with you, if you faced betrayal, manipulation, or injustice in your own family, share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be the lifeline someone else desperately needs. If this video moved you, please share it with friends and family who need to hear it, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of survival, justice, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Thank you for walking this difficult journey with me. Your time honors Nicholas's legacy. A final word of transparency. The stories on this channel blend real experiences with fictionalized elements, designed for educational impact. If dramatized content isn't your preference, I respect that. Feel free to explore other videos. But if you choose to stay, know that every story here carries a lesson worth learning. May God bless you and keep you safe.